Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor?
You can hear the crowd literally going, ooh, why do I show this? What's wrong with me? There are so many lessons in here for all of us. It points to the potential for friendship, for renewal, even in the face of the darkest things you can imagine. It was not even 100 years ago that we were in a battle to the death with this country. And I think it's a great way to celebrate Good Friday, because everything about the lesson of Good Friday, you can find in this. Hey there, friends, fans, and foes of Dad Saves America. John Papola here, and I thought I would take this Friday, this Good Friday, well, to be a little introspective.
You don't have any levels of introspection.
Yes, zero, as little as possible.
Why?
Move forward, go. Yeah, I don't know. I found people who dwell on the past get stuck in the past. It's a real problem, and it's a problem at work, and it's a problem at home.
This is Mark Andreessen, the venture capitalist, co-founder of Andreessen Horowitz, major pro-AI accelerationist, techno-optimist, longtime member of the Valley, sort of an avatar of the tech right as we sit here. And this take on introspection, well, it went kind of viral. First of all, his definition of introspection is a little weird. You know, looking back at the past, it's not just that. It's also just, according to Webster's dictionary, it's a reflective look inward, an examination of one's own thoughts and feelings. And well, Mark doesn't think any of that is worth a whole lot.
And you probably know, if you go back, before 100 years ago, it never would have occurred to anybody to be introspective. Like, it's the whole idea of, all of the modern conceptions around introspection and therapy and all the things that kind of result from that are, kind of manufactured in the 1910s, 1920s.
Say more about that.
Great men of history didn't sit around doing this stuff at any prior point.
I don't have a big beef with Mark Andreessen. I think he's mostly a force for good, I hope. But this is a crazy statement. You just have to go back to Socrates. The unexamined life is not worth living. That's to look inward, to think about who you are and what's the right thing to do, what good is, what truth is. But even if it is just looking backwards, looking into the past, none other than Cicero wrote, to be ignorant of what occurred before you were born is to remain always a child. For what is the worth of human life unless it is woven into the life of our ancestors by the records of history? Now, maybe you disagree with that, and who cares about history? But the idea that introspection was invented in the 1920s and that nobody of consequence did it before Freud came along and started saying that every problem in your life can go back to a malformed relationship with your mother. I think this is it's throwing out the philosophical and moral baby with the bathwater, but he does have a deeper point that is frankly conflating other things that aren't introspection.
It's all a new construct. It was so first Western civilization had to kind of invent the concept of the individual, right, which was like a new concept, several hundred years ago. And then, for a long time, it was, all right, the individual runs, right, and like does all these things. And
I mean, it's some pop philosophical history. I don't know if we should cut him some slack, but okay, I think the individual came about before a couple hundred years ago. Certainly the modern notion of a Western sort of the individual sovereignty in the face of the law, that's relatively new. That goes back just to John Locke and Montesquieu and the Enlightenment. Fair enough.
And then, for a long time, it was, all right, the individual runs, right, and like does all these things and builds things and, builds empires and builds companies and builds technology, does all these things. And then, kind of this kind of guilt-based whammy, kind of showed up from Europe, a lot of it from Vienna, 1910s, 1920s, Freud and all that entire movement, and kind of turned all that inward and basically said, okay, now we need to basically second guess the individual. We need to criticize the individual. The individual needs to self-criticize.
So, of course, because Mark Andreessen is an influential and powerful voice, this got picked up all over the place by sort of center-right New York Times columnists in the avatar of the elite, known as The Atlantic, wrote, Mark Andreessen's mistake, the ability to understand, recognize, and label your own emotions is a necessary part of living a fulfilling life, by David Brooks. I like David Brooks. He's often a pearl clutcher. It's not my favorite. Being a scold, being a sort of center-right scold. It's not my favorite. And of course, the folks on the left had a field day. Mark Andreessen's dangerously unexamined life. The tech mogul declared himself an enemy of introspection, and that erases considerations of conscience from his amoral investment empire. Well, I don't know if his investment empire is amoral exactly, but it is certainly challenging. It is challenging for all of us as we look. AI forces us to look inward quite a bit because the more it does well, the more we have to wonder who and what we are. And I think that that's the world Mark Andreessen is coming from. The world of taking big risks, of running full steam ahead. That is a particular kind of leadership. It's there's a place for it. It's important. But, Cicero and Socrates and many other important thinkers, including the man that was nailed to a cross 2,000 years ago today, had other things that they thought were worth pursuing than just forward, including the pursuit of truth. And I'm reminded of this moment where Pontius Pilate confronts Christ about the truth.
Edon hoc natus sum, ut testimonium veritati perebeo, omnes qui veritatem audiunt, vocem meam audiunt.
Veritas. Quid est veritas?
What is truth? What are you talking about? What is truth? In that moment, Pontius Pilate was being kind of a postmodernist. He was saying, or just a cynic. And I think the question of what is truth, how to pursue it, whether you have it, is something I've been thinking about a lot. And this is where the introspection really comes in. Because, just in the past month, we've tackled a lot of hard subjects here. I've given what I've tried to offer is the best humble take I can. There's in a certain sense, there's nothing humble at all about broadcasting your opinions on the internet. But it has never been harder to know what the truth is in this world. And the complexity of the challenges we face right now really make it hard to know what to believe, to know what position to take, or if you should even take a position at all. And I think the most dangerous part of what Mark Andreessen was saying in that clip, the part that he shares with sort of the woke left-wingers who constantly talk about themselves and their pronouns, and President Trump, who, right from the start said, "I alone can fix it," and has this enormous amount of self-confidence, some of which borders on narcissism. They all suffer from what not just Christian morality, but certainly Christian morality argues is the cardinal sin, the worst of the 7 deadly sins, and that is pride. One of the things that I've found as a Catholic, and you don't have to be Catholic to get anything out of this, because I know some of you are like, roll your eyes with, oh, here comes Papola with the Italian Catholic stuff. But the image of Christ on the cross is really crazy. It's a crazy image. It is a crazy symbol. And I know some people believe that the only reason why that symbol survives to this day is because once Christianity got past its being oppressed phase and then became the official religion of Rome, it was a great way to scare people because it's a scary image. It was, in fact, the image of terror by Rome. And so the adoption of it, you could say, maybe had some of that in it. But I don't think that's what makes it powerful or important. I think what makes it powerful, I think what makes it more necessary now than ever, is that it is 2 things. It is an admission that we live in a world where no one can escape suffering, and that suffering is an inherent part of our reality. This is something that Christianity shares quite a bit with Buddhism in that way. That to even have wants and desires is to submit yourself to suffering because it means you aren't having the thing you want. To have a love is to also have things that you hate. There's this duality in life like that. And so grappling with suffering and being able to overcome it or being able to live with it and not succumb to being a victim of suffering. Well, that's one of the most important things you can learn as an adult. That's one of the most important things we as parents need to teach our kids. And the other piece of that, and it's in a way, it's one and the same thing, is the danger of pride. The fact that pride is this driving force behind all of the things that we ultimately get wrong. All of the other 7 deadly sins get supercharged by pride. What is pride? Pride is essentially, as I think about it, it is a belief that you are owed more than you are owed, or that you're owed anything, in fact. It is an unearned, excessive celebration of the self. And in a very real sense, it lacks all introspection, because pride and hubris are 2 sides of the same coin. And this is one of the problems with our techno-futurists, is that the hubris, the pride, the sort of will to power personality that does things like create robots that might just kill us all, but does it anyway because we've got to try it. Well, that is a prideful act. It is confident, but it shades into pride. That, I think, is under the surface what makes that Andreessen clip unnerving to normal people, not just politically motivated, commentators. Pride has historically been understood to be this great danger. It's the warning of Icarus flying too close to the sun. It is the Achilles heel. Pride is there below the surface of basically every great tragedy of all of human storytelling, of Macbeth, of the Odyssey, the Greek gods, Loki, and the collapse into Ragnarok. You just crack open any book that's older than 100 years, and you will find pride at the central animating force of the hero's fall. And I'm not even claiming to be some super well-read guy. I'm thin on the classics, if I'm being perfectly honest. But you can't even have a cursory interaction with the great books or the classic works of the West. If you're going to talk about Western civilization and ignore introspection and ignore the warnings about pride, I don't think you've grappled with what Western civilization actually has to offer. And not just Western civilization, all of civilization. You can't be a human and embrace pride as a virtue. And I think the kernel of truth inside of Andreessen's commentary is that, in a certain sense, he was pointing at that self-centeredness, that intense focus on the self that did come out of this age of the therapeutic, the age of therapy, the age of psychoanalysis, the obsession with the self. Those are expressions of pridefulness, and they are dangerous, and they give rise to crazy ideology, to an ideology that is essentially immune to the pursuit of truth, to falsification, to anything like humility. Because if all you care about is your own experience, your own lived experience, well, what's more prideful than that, to elevate your own personal experience above that of other people or that of the wisdom of the ages? But that is the world we live in today. The wisdom of the ages is training data, and all that matters is my feelings. That is the vice grip that society is being squeezed in between the left and the right to some extent. And I think we have to break free of that vice. And I think on Good Friday, the cross offers a way to set pride aside. Because what the cross was, at the end of the day, was an act of total humiliation. It is a subjugation. And that is really powerful. That is the reason why it survives as a powerful image, not of fear, but of respect and of a sense of your limitations. The notion that God himself would come down to earth and be humiliated in the worst way imaginable There is a powerful lesson in that, even if you only think it's a mythology and not the literal truth. But I think the method of thinking that demands of you is the only way we can pursue truth. In fact, in so many ways, it's the way to cut through dogma. In fact, I think, famous atheist comedian John Cleese, I think he sees clearly on this matter.
It's also about closed systems of thought, whether they're political or theological or religious, whatever. Systems by which whatever evidence is given to the person, he merely adapts it, fits it into his ideology. You show the same event to a Marxist and a Catholic, for example, both of them fine, they both have explanations of it. I mean, it's what to be pompous poppers on about with falsifiability of theories. I mean, once you've actually got an idea that is whirring around so fast that no other light or contrary evidence can come in, then I think it's very dangerous.
That is the danger of our times. He's talking about confirmation bias. If all you do is seek to reinforce your own beliefs, itself very much an act of pride, you close down the mechanism of truth seeking. If Pontius Pilate is asking, what is truth? Well, it's hard to find. It is there. And the way you get at it, first and foremost, is trying to kill your false beliefs. And philosopher of science Karl Popper was really the first one to articulate this approach, the approach of falsification.
You might think that scientists begin with hypotheses such as all swans are white and then go about looking for evidence to support them. Karl Popper disagreed. He suggested that scientists do indeed begin with hypotheses, bold hypotheses that can be falsified by evidence. But rather than looking for supporting evidence, Popper argued scientists go out of their way to refute their own hypotheses, testing them to destruction. They go out searching for black swans, not more white swans. Science is all about falsification, not confirmation. It's a series of conjectures and refutations. A former Marxist himself, Popper wasn't fond of Marxism. Marxists argued that theirs was a scientific analysis of history. Everything that happened was determined by class struggle, and a workers' revolution was inevitable. However, when the workers failed to revolt, rather than taking this as a refutation of their view, Marxists suggested workers were simply victims of false consciousness, unable to see the situation as it truly was. Popper fulminated against this way of dealing with counter-evidence, claiming it immunized Marxist hypotheses, which were originally testable, turning them into irrefutable pseudoscience. There was no imaginable observation that could prove the Marxists were wrong. If the workers revolted, that showed the Marxists were right. If they didn't revolt, that also showed they were right. It was win-win.
Or in the case of Marxists, lose-lose all around. This is a powerful way to think about your own beliefs. And it is one that the technology platforms from Mark and his friends really discourage us from doing, because what they do is offer an engine of confirmation bias. That is what this is. If you are watching this video, there's a decent chance you've watched one of my other videos and liked it. And so now you're watching this. And so this is as good a time as any to remind you to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Less than half of you that watch these are subscribed, so it really helps us reach more people and hit our goal of 500,000 subscribers. And now let's get back to it. That's confirmation bias. That's what it is. It's, oh, you've engaged with this, you've demonstrated you like it, let's show you some more. We are really awash in this problem. I can feel it. I can feel the impossibility of knowing what is true along many dimensions, even ones where I feel like I have a pretty strong grasp. I have to consciously try to remind myself that maybe I'm just wrong. I'll give you a couple of examples. Over the past couple weeks, I have said that I basically, with a lot of caveats, support what President Trump is trying to do in Iran. I would say I'm sort of at the 51-yard line, although as it drags on and perhaps we send troops in, that maybe shades into the 49. We'll see. But how do I even know if I should have opinion at all on this? I'm not over there. How could any of us really know what exactly to think about this? The easiest way to go is to one of the two first principles polls, to just say, I have sort of a priori beliefs, pre-existing rules, like war is always horrible, therefore I'm always opposed to it. That's easy. It's pretty moral, not a bad place to be. That tends to be my default, which makes this Iran deal weird that I didn't reflexively say, hell no, I won't go, or I don't want anyone else to go. Then there's the total opposite, which in this case would just be whatever President Trump wants to do, I'm for. Now, I'm not in that camp either. In the middle is a minefield. Are you just mushy and you're flip-flopping with the wind? Are you trying to grapple with nuances that you don't even have access to? What kind of criteria do you have? How do you falsify your beliefs? How do you falsify the claims being made? I mean, one of the things with the war in Iran, for example, is we haven't really been given a crystal clear assertion, let alone hypothesis, of what success looks like. That's pretty bad. That should shift me into the maybe this is a bad idea column. Why was I on the good idea in the first place? Well, that gets to another topic I've talked about in the past couple of weeks that is very easy to have strong opinions about and has a lot of complexity, and that's Islam. What to think about Islam? As a Christian, I think it's false. As an American who believes that the American First Amendment is one of the most important things that constitutes being an American, I think the assertions made about the supremacy of Islam in the world of government and Sharia law makes me pretty worried about it. I don't really want any of that here. But am I a scholar of Islam? No, I am not. And so I occupy an opinion that is subject to change if I get enough extra information. Sufficient. Falsify my beliefs. That's one of the reasons why I love the comment section. I'm looking for my views to be rounded out, pushed back on, and called out. And if you practice that muscle, which is what I try to do as often as possible on these videos, I think it can keep you humble and be the way you pursue truth, the way you keep yourself sane, the way you know you're not just caught in an echo chamber of confirmation bias, which is everywhere today. It also involves a certain amount of suffering, because when you put out your opinions and then you turn out to be wrong, that hurts. And I think one of the things, again, to come back to the cross as a Christian on Good Friday, is that image of suffering put forward is also an image of ego death. The assertion of Christianity is that Christ is essentially one embodiment in the Trinity of God himself. And so what you have in the crucifixion is God subjecting himself to the humiliation of the cross. And it is a model. He says, I am the way, the truth, and the life. And so if he can do it, so can we. And frankly, dying on the cross is a lot worse than having an opinion you have, even one that you've professed into the world, overturned and realizing that, man, I was kind of stupid on that. I'm wrong. I'm sorry. That's a pretty low bar for suffering. But it's an essential one. And it's one that we as parents have to model for our kids, which is in and of itself difficult because we do have to establish ourselves as an authority. But even in that, I think proper authority, proper leadership earns the following. And it is okay to admit you're wrong with your kids. In fact, it teaches them how to do it themselves. And I think that is something that if we do more of, we will end up with, I hope, a generation that's more capable of it. The way, the truth, and the life. How can we do that for our kids? How can we model a good life, a good way to live? And how can we model what it means to pursue the truth? How can we do that? Well, just like falsification is a more powerful tool for disproving things that are wrong, simply not lying in some ways is an easier and a straighter shot than trying to figure out what exactly the truth really is. Because the truth is hard to understand. It is, to some extent, masked from us. We never fully know the whole story. I'm not saying there is no truth. There very much is. And we know there is because ask anybody if there's anything they believe is false, and they'll be quick to say yes. So if there's false, there's truth. But one of the best ways to get to truth is to not live false, to not live by lies. And that is the title of an article written by former Soviet author Alexander Solzhenitsyn. He is a man who wrote the Gulag Archipelago, one of the most important voices, sort of exposing what Marxism and communism actually meant in practice. And this article, like so many things from that period, is profound. It has important lessons for us. And my producer Nolan pulled a clip up from Alexander that I think is worth exploring.
Идут ко мне письма, во множестве идут письма, и все письма полны мраку.
I know the Russian is hard, so I ran this thing through Heijin, which is in some ways sort of a tragedy, but it's also kind of a miracle. So here is what Alexander sounds like speaking English.
I receive letters. Letters come in great numbers, and all these letters are full of the gloom of suffering. The people are cast into poverty. The people are cast into suffering. Every letter is a whole life story. What should I tell them? I can only offer this comfort that by nature we are endowed with great spiritual health and resilience. Yes, no matter how hard life is, we are stronger because we can endure. If you cannot influence things on a large scale, then you must influence by doing your work as best as you can, preserving your family and helping those around you. This is the comfort I send. I have written it in my books too.
Tell me, is live not by lies still relevant today?
To live not by lies, it's an eternal principle. It only changes its forms. Of course, even now one can formulate what it means to live not by lies. And it can be formulated now because we have no less lies in general. They have just taken a different turn.
Truer words were never spoken. This is a profoundly important figure in history. Somebody I strongly recommend you revisit if you've ever read him. And well, I want to read a little bit from this article because it is really important in this moment where trying to discern truth from lies and the lies we tell ourselves has just gotten more and more difficult. And so a little bit of background. On the day Solzhenitsyn was arrested, February 12th, 1974, he released the text of Live Not by Lies. The next day, he was exiled to the West where he received a hero's welcome. This moment marks the peak of his fame. Solzhenitsyn equated lies with ideology, the illusion that human nature and society can be reshaped to predetermined specifications. This is the fundamental progressive thrust to straighten that crooked arrow of man. And his last word before leaving his homeland urges Soviet citizens as individuals to refrain from cooperating with the regime's lies. Even the most timid can take this least demanding step towards spiritual independence. If many march together on this path of passive resistance, the whole inhuman system will totter and collapse. When you grapple with the world Solzhenitsyn was escaping, the world he was trying to save, it gives you a window into the kind of suffering that Christ's crucifixion was saying is just part of this horrendously fallen world of ours, that we will go through. We will have to carry our crosses over and over again for thousands of years. Bear with me, and let's dig in. There was a time when we dared not rustle a whisper. But now we write and read Samizdat, and congregating in the smoking rooms of research institutes, heartily complain to each other of all they are muddling up, of all they are dragging us into. There's that unnecessary bravado around our ventures into space against the backdrop of ruin and poverty at home. And the buttressing of distant savage regimes, and the kindling of civil wars, and the ill-thought-out cultivation of Mao Zedong at our expense to boot. In the end, we'll be the ones sent out against him, and we'll have to go. What other option will there be? And they put whomever they want on trial and brand the healthy as mentally ill, and it is always they, while we are helpless. We are approaching the brink. Already a universal spiritual demise is upon us. A physical one is about to flare up and engulf us and our children, while we continue to smile sheepishly and babble. But what can we do to stop it? We haven't the strength. We have so hopelessly seeded our humanity that for the modest handouts of today, we are ready to surrender up all principles, our soul, all the labors of our ancestors, all the prospects of our descendants, anything to avoid disrupting our meager existence. We have lost our strength, our pride, our passion. We do not even fear a common nuclear death, do not fear a third world war. Perhaps we'll hide away in some crevice, but fear only to take a civil stance. We hope only not to stray from the herd, not to set out on our own and risk suddenly having to make do without the white bread and hot water heater, a Moscow residency permit. We have internalized well the lessons drummed into us by the state. We are forever content and comfortable with its premise. We cannot escape the environment, the social conditions. They shape us. Being determines consciousness. What have we to do with this? We can do nothing. But we can do everything, even if we comfort and lie to ourselves that this is not so. It is not they who are guilty of everything, but we ourselves. Only we. Some will counter, but really, there is nothing to be done. Our mouths are gagged. No one listens to us. No one asks us. How can we make them listen to us? To make them reconsider is impossible. The natural thing would be simply not to re-elect them, but there are no re-elections in our country. In the West, they have strikes, protest marches, but we are too cowed, too scared. How does one just give up one's job, just go out onto the street? All the other fateful means resorted to over the last century of Russia's bitter history are even less fitting for us today. True, let's not fall back on them. Today, when all the axes have hewn what they hacked, when all that was sown has borne fruit, we can see how lost, how drugged were those conceited youths who sought through terror, bloody uprisings, and civil war to make the country just and content. No thank you, fathers of enlightenment. We now know that the vileness of the means begets the vileness of the result. Let our hands be clean. So has the circle closed? So is there indeed no way out? So the only thing left to do is wait inertly? What if something just happens by itself? But it will never come unstuck by itself. If we all, every day, continue to acknowledge, glorify, and strengthen it, if we do not, at the least, recoil from its most vulnerable point, from lies. When violence bursts onto the peaceful human condition, its face is flushed with self-assurance. It displays on its banner and proclaims, "I am violence. Make way, step aside, I will crush you." But violence ages swiftly. A few years pass, and it is no longer sure of itself. To prop itself up, to appear decent, it will without fail call forth its ally, lies. For violence has nothing to cover itself but lies, and lies can only persist through violence. And it is not every day and not on every shoulder that violence brings down its heavy hand. It demands of us only submission to lies, a daily participation in deceit. And this suffices as our fealty. And therein we find, neglected by us, the simplest, the most accessible key to our liberation, a personal non-participation in lies. Even if all is covered by lies, even if all is under their rule, let us resist in the smallest way. Let their rule hold not through me. And this is the way to break out of the imaginary encirclement of our inertness, the easiest way for us and the most devastating for the lies. For when people renounce lies, lies simply cease to exist. Like parasites, they can only survive when attached to a person. We are not called upon to step out onto the square and shout out the truth, to say out loud what we think. This is scary. We are not ready. But let us at least refuse to say what we do not think. This is the way, then, the easiest and most accessible for us, given our deep-seated organic cowardice. Much easier than It's scary even to utter the words. Civil disobedience a la Gandhi. Our way must be never knowingly support lies. Having understood where the lies begin, and many see this line differently, step back from that gangrenous edge. Let us not glue back the flaking scales of the ideology, not gather back its crumbling bones, nor patch together its decomposing garb. And we will be amazed how swiftly and helplessly the lies will fall away, and that which is destined to be naked will be exposed as such to the world. And thus, overcoming our timidity, let each man choose. Will he remain a witting servant of the lies? Needless to say, not due to natural predisposition, but in order to provide a living for the family, to rear the children in the spirit of lies? Or has the time come for him to stand straight as an honest man, worthy of the respect of his children and contemporaries? And from that day onward, he will not write, sign, nor publish any way a single line distorting, so far as he can see, the truth. Will not utter such a line in private or in public conversation, nor read it from a crib sheet, nor speak it in the role of educator, canvasser, teacher, actor. Will not in painting, sculpture, photography, technology, or music depict, support, or broadcast a single false thought, a single distortion of the truth as he discerns it. Will not cite in writing or in speech a single guiding quote for gratification, insurance, or his success at work, unless he fully shares the cited thought and believes that it fits the context precisely. Will not be forced to a demonstration or a rally if it runs counter to his desire and his will. Will not take up and raise a banner or slogan in which he does not fully believe. Will not raise a hand and vote for a proposal which he does not sincerely support. Will not vote openly or in secret ballot for a candidate whom he deems dubious or untrustworthy. Will not be impelled to a meeting where a forced and distorted discussion is expected to take place. Will at once walk out of a session, meeting, lecture, play, or film as soon as he hears the speaker utter a lie, ideological drivel, or shameless propaganda. That doesn't leave a lot, even in America, for us to watch. Will not subscribe to nor buy in retail a newspaper or journal that distorts or hides the underlying facts. Again, a difficult part. This is by no means an exhaustive list of the possible and necessary ways of evading lies. But he who begins to cleanse himself will, with a cleansed eye, easily discern yet other opportunities. Yes, at first it will not be fair. Someone will have to temporarily lose his job. For the young who seek to live by truth, this will at first severely complicate life, for their tests and quizzes too are stuffed with lies. And so choices will have to be made. When you contemplate telling your college student, just tell the professor what they want to hear. I hope this rings in your ears, because that is a mistake. That is living by lies. But there is no loophole left for anyone who seeks to be honest. Not even for a day, not even in the safest technical occupations can he avoid even a single one of the listed choices to be made in favor of either truth or lies, in favor of spiritual independence or spiritual servility. And as for him who lacks the courage to defend even his own soul, let him not brag of his progressive views, boast of his status as an academician or a recognized artist or a distinguished citizen or general. Let him say to himself plainly, I am cattle. I am a coward. I seek only warmth and to eat my fill. For us who have grown staid over time, even this most moderate path of resistance will not be easy to set out upon. But how much easier is it than self-immolation or even a hunger strike? Flames will not engulf your body, your eyes will not pop out of your head, and your family will always have at least a piece of black bread to wash down with a glass of clear water. Betrayed and deceived by us, did not a great European people, the Czechoslovaks, show us how one can stand down the tanks with bared chest alone, as long as inside it beats a worthy heart? It will not be an easy path, perhaps, but it is easiest among those that lie before us. Not an easy choice for the body, but the only one for the soul. Not an easy path, but then we already have among us people, dozens even, who have for years abided by all these rules, who live by the truth. And so we need not be the first to set out on this path. Ours is but to join. The more of us set out together, the thicker our ranks. The easier and shorter will this path be for us all. If we become thousands, they will not cope. They will be unable to touch us. If we will grow to tens of thousands, we will not recognize our country. But if we shrink away, then let us cease complaining that someone does not let us draw breath. We do it to ourselves. Let us then cower and hunker down, while our comrades, the biologists, bring closer the day when our thoughts can be read and our genes altered. And that is frighteningly prescient and scary to this day to think about. And if from this also we shrink away, then we are worthless, hopeless, and it is of us that Pushkin asks with scorn, why offer herds their liberation, their heritage each generation, the yoke with jingles and the whip? That is Alexander Solzhenitsyn, February 12th, 1974. It resonates to this day. It resonates here in America in too many quarters. It is a warning for all of us. And I think it's a great way to celebrate Good Friday, because everything about the lesson of Good Friday, you can find in this. It's all in there, all present. There are so many lessons in here for all of us. It is a mirror of one of my other favorite works, which is Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning, in which he says that the final freedom we all face is the freedom to decide how to respond to our circumstances. These are the kernels of wisdom that we can get out of the great struggles of the 20th century. And as we come to a close on this heady and often dark moment here, I thought I would leave us with something light, leave us with something optimistic, because we actually have this viral moment this week that's sort of a continuation of a very strange moment in the White House that points to the potential for friendship, for renewal, even in the face of the darkest things you can imagine, namely World War and nuclear holocaust. And some of you may have remembered that the recently elected Prime Minister of Japan came to visit the White House, and President Trump, well, it was really something. I mean, this image in and of itself, just think about this for a minute. They attacked us, we dropped nukes, and here are two leaders of former enemies hugging like friends. But the best happens at the press conference.
One question, why didn't you tell US allies in Europe and Asia, like Japan, about the war before attacking Iran? So we are very confused about we Japanese citizens.
Well, one thing, you don't want to signal too much. You know, when we go in, we went in very hard, and we didn't tell anybody about it because we wanted surprise. Who knows better about surprise than Japan? Okay, why didn't you tell me about Pearl Harbor? Okay,
you can hear the crowd literally going, "Ooh!"
Right? You know, he's asking me, do you believe in surprise?
And then Trump pulling a Norm Macdonald repetition of the joke. You know, like surprise, like the bombs, like they dropped the bombs.
I won't be as funny as that last bit. Just so you know.
Why do I show this? Why do I end with this clip? What's wrong with me? Well, first of all, later, the Prime Minister seemed to be nonplussed about this joke about Pearl Harbor.
Japan is back.
But maybe Japan is back. There was a tweet that got over 1.5 million views from a Japanese citizen that just is worth reading because it's just really something. It just tells you just have no idea what's going on half the time in this world. Do you truly understand what Japan just gained? As a Japanese citizen, I'm telling you, this moment changed history. Trump's Pearl Harbor joke wasn't an insult. It was the key that finally unlocked something buried deep in the Japanese soul. For 80 years, we've carried apology and guilt like a permanent shadow, haunted by the past, bound by the Constitution America wrote for us, forever in reflection mode. He turned that raw wound into a shared laugh between equals. No more endless atonement, no more vassal shadow. The curse is broken. Japan is free now. Thank you, Mr. President. We're allowed to stand tall again as true partners, not subordinates. The strongest alliance in the world is rising. Equals, brothers, ride or die. When I first saw this clip of President Trump, I thought, I did not have this in my bingo card as a reaction from anyone in Japan. But, you know, humor is a powerful thing. And well, this clearly started something of a movement on Twitter from Japanese people just sharing their love with America. Perhaps the best one, especially as Lent comes to an end. And if you're a Christian and maybe weren't eating meat on Fridays, you might join in this Japanese celebration of good old American barbecue. This account, translated from the Japanese, says, "I like this photo of American men and meat. Someday I'd like to join in on this in person." And this is just, you know, kind of a standard issue thing you'd see anywhere around my neighborhood this weekend, perhaps. And this is replying to another Japanese post saying, "In Sasebo's dining establishment, it's common to spot U.S. military personnel enjoying their meals with lively enthusiasm. One day at a yakiniku restaurant, I came across a group that reached an oddly intense level of excitement just upon seeing the bacon." And of course, here's a screaming over 9,000 powered American GIs going nuts for Japanese bacon with 46 million views. Just think about this for a minute. Think about it was not even 100 years ago that we were in a battle to the death with this country. And as you scroll down, you just see the love returned in kind. You see Americans saying, "Come on in." "You are officially invited, friend. Bring beer," to this guy on the water with a smoker. You've seen mountains of brisket from Florida and Texas. Invitations abound. This is a moment of hope, a silly, ridiculous, glorious moment of hope filled with crazy memes and shared culture, shared cowboy culture. And it's not the only shared cultural moment that the Japanese have with us in America. One other tweet that also went fairly viral was this friend across the Pacific saying, "Everyone in Japan knows Take Me Home, Country Roads by John Denver. We cover it all the time, so I hope our American friends can appreciate it." And again, the thread, which I just have to share, has all kinds of hilarious stuff. Here's actually a personal buddy of mine in the thread from Argentina saying, "We love you guys. Can you guys please have more kids? Here, here. We want more of you, not less." Here's a Godzilla John Denver meme. But of course, the Country Road rendition, I wish I could send this as a capsule back to the 1940s and the aftermath in the 1950s and say, someday we will be friends. Just you wait. And so, my friends, we've been to the darkness. It's Easter weekend. At the end of these 3 days, for those of us who believe in Christ, He's risen. It is a day of joy, and this is a joyful moment. It's a moment that tells all of us that tomorrow can be better, with a little introspection, a little humility, and a lot of love. Have a great weekend.